The findings we are releasing this morning carry implications that extend well beyond any boardroom or policy meeting. It is through your reporting, your storytelling that these conversations reach the people who need to hear them the most. And we are grateful for your continued partnership and for the platform you provide for exactly these kinds of conversations. So, what is the 2026 Edelman Barometer telling us about Malaysia? The short answer is that Malaysia is genuinely strong position on trust. Our trust index has risen this year, placing us among the top 10 markets globally out of 28 countries surveyed. But I want to share you the headline that I think frames everything that follows. Malaysia has earned its trust, and that matters for investment confidence, for institutional credibility, and for our standing in a world where trust has become a genuinely scarce resource. But the headline is not the whole story. It never is. Beneath that strong number, something complex is taking shape. A majority of Malaysians, a significant majority of Malaysians, hold what research calls an insular trust mindset. What it means is that while Malaysians trust institutions broadly, that trust narrows when those institutions are led by people who differ from them in their values, their backgrounds, or their approaches to solving problems. Malaysia's next challenge is not building trust, it's extending trust across differences.
In 2017, trust was in crisis. 2022, we were in the cycle of distrust. 2024, innovation was in error. People were afraid of what was coming and not convinced the people in charge had their interests at heart. Last year, it was grievance. The sense that the system is rigged against ordinary people. Each year, the world changes, but the underlying trajectory has been remarkably consistent. For 26 years, shared reality, that the idea that we broadly agree on facts, on institution, on who is trustworthy, has been eroded, which is trust. And this year, that erosion has a name: insularity. This is important context because what we are measuring in 2026 is not a reaction to a single event. It is the accumulations of 2 decades of fracturing. That is the scale. The report identifies a very specific progression. It starts with polarization, not simply disagreement, but our hardened belief that your society is fundamentally divided and that those divisions are not going away. If anything, they are getting worse. You see politics, you see your newsfeed, it's everywhere. Polarization left unchecked generates grievance, a felt sense that the system is not working for you, that others are getting ahead at your expense, that the rules are written by and for a different class of people. And that sense of grievance, that constant background noise of resentment, produces the third condition: insularity. And what is feeding all three of these forces? Global pandemic aftermath, the cost of living crisis, geopolitical instability, economic displacement from automation and AI, misinformation flooding in every media channel, discrimination that remains visible and unresolved. So these are not abstract forces, right? So the result is like a world where trust is becoming conditional, where people extend trust not to institution, not to expertise, not to credentials, but to the familiarity. The trust index, as what Mazun has said, and also have sort of highlighted, is a composite score. It averages across businesses, government, media, and NGOs. And the global picture this year shows a structural decline that has been building for years. Developed markets are largely in trust-positive territory. Markets like China, Indonesia, India, and the UAE. These are markets where institutional confidence is higher. Developed markets, however, are struggling. Germany, Japan, the UK, France, all in a distrust zone. Malaysia scores 71 on the trust index, right? If you look at the ranking core, just like that, Malaysia looks healthy. And in many ways, it is. But I want to make a point about what aggregate scores actually tells us. A trust index of 71 tells you the average across 4 institutions and across the entire population. It does not tell you how trust is distributed. It does not tell you who is left behind, and it just tells you what is happening under the surface. That is the Malaysia story of 2026, right? So, and it is significantly more complex than the headline suggests. So we're going to go a bit deeper now. At the institutional level, the 2026 data brings genuine good news for Malaysia. Trust in business is up 5 points year-on-year, NGOs up 6, media up 5, government up 6. Across all 4 major institutions, Malaysia is seeing meaningful gains in global environment where institutions are struggling to maintain credibility that is significant. It reflects, at least in part, a sense that Malaysian institutions have been responsive. But the finding that I want to sit with for a moment is this. Because it is going to be central to everything that follows, is this. My employer, right, your workplace where you work with, is the single most trusted entity in the Malaysian institutional landscape. Not the government, not the NGOs, not the media, not businesses. My employer. The organization is where you work. The person who signs your paycheck. That relationship carries more trust than any other institutional relationship in Malaysia society today. Think about what it means. It means that the primary conduit of institutional trust in Malaysia is not a government ministry, not a news organization, not a corporation. It is the daily, personal, direct relationship between employees and the organization that they work for. So, as here rise, trust goes local. That is the organizing insight for the entire section. I want to walk you through the specific fears because each one is directly recognizable to anyone who has been paying attention to what is happening. Here is the question that cuts straight to the heart of the people around the world. Do you believe that the next generation will be better off than you are today? Globally, only 32% says yes. Almost 7 in 10 people on Earth today look at the trajectory of things and say, it's going to be worse for our children than it is for us. That is one of the most sobering statistics in the entire report. In Malaysia, optimism declined by 7 points in a single year. That is statistically significant drop and it reflects something real. It is a predictor of behavior. It tells us how people respond to new products, new policies, new ideas, and with skepticism, with caution, with bias toward what is already known and trusted. I want every business leader and communication professionals in this room today to pay particular attention to this because these numbers have direct implication for how you lead, how you communicate, and how your people show up to work every day. Among Malaysian employees, fear of job loss due to a looming recession has hit an all-time high, up 14 points since 2020. 14 points, and that is not a gradual drift. That is a sustained, compounding build of anxiety, and it has now reached levels we have never recorded before. Malaysia is one of the most trade-dependent economies in the world, and our exports to GDP ratio is among the highest in Southeast Asia. So when the US and China exchange tariff escalation, supply chains in semiconductor and electric equipment, palm oil derivatives are disrupted, Malaysian workers feel it. It is not abstract macroeconomic fact, it is a direct threat to the livelihood of people in your organization. So when your people carry this level of economic fear, when they worry about their jobs, their future, their ability to support their families, the way you communicate as leader matters enormously. Visibility matters, honesty matters, so the story you choose to tell and the stories you choose to stay silent on are being noticed and interpreted. There is a very specific fear that the Trust Barometer has been tracking. Not just general worry about misinformation, but the fear that foreign actors are deliberately contaminating our information environment, planting falsehood designed to inflame our differences, deepen our divisions, and erode our ability to trust each other. So in Malaysia, it has grown by 11 points since 2021. That is a trajectory, and if you think about what Malaysian information environment looked like during the fieldwork period, you can see why. Unverified content is circulating widely on WhatsApp, Telegram, social media platform, touching from government subsidy decision to geopolitical crisis to racial and religious sensitivities. So here is why it matters, right, for business specifically. When people are afraid of bad information, they contract their information circle. They rely on sources they already trust, and the penalty for losing it through any perceived dishonesty and inconsistency is now more severe than it has ever been. Globally, only 39% of people say they regularly consume information from sources with a different political viewpoint to their own, at least once a week. That number declined by 6 points in a single year, and it fell in virtually every country surveyed. This is a simultaneous cross-cultural retreat from intellectual exposure of differences. For communication leaders in this room, the persuadable middle, the people who might change their mind based on new information, is shrinking. The people who already trust you will continue to find content that confirms they should. The people who distrust you are increasingly unlikely to ever encounter a positive perspective. So relevance, consistency and trust are only levers that work in fragmented information environment. This slide tells one of the most important trust stories of our time. Among the people who say a major societal event in the past 5 years has changed their level of trust in institution or other people, and that is 95% of the respondents, almost everyone. The pattern of what has gained trust versus what has lost trust is stark and consistent. Who has gained trust? My neighbors, my family, made gain of 11 points. My co-workers up 11th, and my own CEO up 9. The person running the organization I work for has gained significant ground. This is the deepest expression of insularity at trust level, and it creates a remarkable set of implications. It means that as a CEO or a senior leader, you are being held to a different standard altogether than you were, say, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Your employees are watching you more closely. They are drawing conclusions about your character, your values, your consistency, and your authenticity. Most important. Who has lost trust? National government leaders down 16 points, major news organizations down 11 points, foreign business leaders down 6 points. So the pattern you're seeing here is unmistakable, and it is not accidental. Right? So this is the deepest expression of insularity at the trust level. And the inverse of equally true, foreign business leaders, people who feel remote and different are losing ground, which brings us to a structural dimension of the Malaysia story that I want to address directly. Malaysia's headline trust number of 71 is encouraging, but it conceals a significant structural inequality. When you break the trust index by income, right, a 9-point gap opens up between high income and low income Malaysians. The most economically comfortable Malaysians are the most trusting of institutions. Those under the greatest economic pressure are the least trusting of institutions. And that gap, you can see here, has persisted. For business, this matters in multiple ways. Your workforce is not a monolith. The degree to which your employees trust your organization, your leaders and your communications is shaped significantly by where they sit on the income distribution. Low-income employees are operating with a lower trust baseline, which means they require more consistency, more transparency, and more visible follow-through to maintain confidence. If your customer base extends across income segments, and for most businesses in Malaysia it does, you are dealing with audiences who have fundamentally different trust thresholds. There is now a measurable and substantial domestic trust premium in Malaysia. Malaysians trust companies headquartered in Malaysia at 77%. They trust companies from foreign countries at an average of 59%. That is an 18-point gap. And it is not unique to Malaysia. As you can see, domestic trust advantages across most market surveys. But in Malaysia, the gap is significant and it is commercially consequential. For multinational companies operating in Malaysia, this is a headwind that you cannot wish away. The data tells us clearly what works: long-term investment in local communities, hiring from the local communities you operate in, and building relationships that extend beyond the transactional. We'll see the specific numbers on this shortly, but the headline is clear. Presence without relationship is not enough. We need to build trust. So, insularity, and that is the verdict of the research. 65% of Malaysians are hesitant or unwilling to trust someone who is different from them. Nearly 2 in 3. This is the single most important number this year, but I want to be precise about what we mean by different, because this is not simply about visible demographics. So, the Trust Barometer measures insularity across 4 distinct dimensions. First, people who live by different core values than mine. Secondly, people who believe different facts and trust different information sources than mine. Third, people who want to address societal problems differently than I do. And last but not least, the fourth, people from different cultural backgrounds or lifestyle than mine. And across all 4 dimensions, on average, a majority of Malaysians say they are hesitant or unwilling to extend their trust. But the consequences are very specifically Malaysian, right? Because in a diverse, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society built on the premise of coexistence and independence, a society where entire social contract rests on the ability to build trust across differences, an insular mindset in 2/3 of the population is not a background condition. It is a structural challenge. Here, the report puts concrete numbers on the cost of insularity. The 3 findings in particular should concern every business leaders in this room. 49% of Malaysians employees say they would put less effort in helping a project team leader whose political beliefs differ from their own. Almost half of your workforce. The collaboration costs, the innovation that never happens because someone decided not to give their best to a leader they did not see themselves in. 38% say they would rather switch departments than report to a manager with different values to theirs. More than 1 in 3 of your people would actively disrupt the organizational structure to avoid working under someone they distrust on values ground. And then there is the third number. 43% of Malaysians say they would support reducing the number of foreign companies operating in Malaysia, even if it means higher prices for themselves, right? Think about that for a moment. Half of the population is willing to pay more to support local innovators, right? So the message from this data is very clear. Insularity is not a soft social issue, it is a hard economic one, and it is already costing Malaysian businesses in productivity, in talent mobility, and openness to the global economy. Among the 65% of Malaysians who hold an insular mindset, the data shows a dramatic drop in institutional trust when they believe the leadership is different from them in values, in background, in how they see the world. The trust gap between those with an open mindset and those with an insular mindset is approximately about 24 points across businesses, government, NGOs, and the media. That is a gap of almost a quarter. So I want to be careful not to reduce this to simply diversity, right? Though diversity is clearly relevant, the deeper point is this: leadership authenticity is now a trust requirement. Leaders who are perceived as close, who speak only to their own constituency, who are visible only in comfortable spaces, are going to face a growing trust deficit among the insular majority. And leaders who visibly engage and whatnot are going to build a trust premium that their competitors cannot easily replicate. The public has formed a very clear view. Every institution has an obligation to actively bridge, divide, and build trust between groups of people who distrust each other. That is the expectation. So media faces the highest obligation and a 37-point expectation performance gap. The public wants media to lead on this. They do not believe it is doing so at the moment. The government faces a 36-point gap. NGOs 25 points, businesses 26 points. These are significant shortfalls across all boards. Combine that with what we established earlier, that employer trust is the highest in any institution in Malaysia, and that the CEO is one of the few leadership figures who can actually gain trust in recent years, you have a very specific, very compelling case for why the employer is the most powerful trust broker in Malaysia. We are looking at how are we going to broker trust? How are we going to extend trust across that small group? The report asks Malaysian respondents a direct question. When a business is responding to a highly diverse social issue, what could it do to earn your trust? 38% say that most trust-generating action is to encourage people to cooperate or finding solutions, without taking a side, not to win the argument, right? 32% say support a position that is true to your own values. There is a space for value consistent communication, but a dominant preference is for facilitation, not advocacy. This is one of the findings that runs directly counter to some of the communication instinct, the impulse to be bold, to take a stand, to demonstrate values through advocacy, right? So the most trusted act in a moment of division is to be the person or the organization that helps everyone find a common ground. That is trust building, and it is what Malaysians are asking for. The report asks Malaysians, employees, what their employer could do actively to facilitate trust between people with different values. And 3 specific actions emerge with remarkably consistency and with high endorsement levels. 85% say promote a shared identity and culture that reminds employees of what unites them rather than what divides them. 83% support building teams that require people with different values to succeed together by design, not by accident. And a startling 83% support mandatory training for constructive dialogue in a moment of conflict. So this is not a mandate, it is also a very specific agenda that the organization needs to, to treat it seriously, to build these practices in terms of how are we brokering trust, to extend it, to now move it upwards rather than keeping it inwards. The report offers us 4 conclusions that I want to leave you with. The first, pervasive insularity stalls progress. That is not an hypothesis, it is a measurement. Economic uncertainty and unmitigated fear have driven 2/3 of Malaysians into an insular mindset. Number 2, secondly, business must address insularity. Not the government alone, not the NGOs alone, business, specifically employees. Employers have this mandate, right? Third, trust brokering is both a strategy and a skill set. It is not just a PR exercise, it's a genuine reorientation of how we engage with our audiences. And last but not least, employers are positioned to scale. You have the highest institutional trust in Malaysia to do so, to broker trust amongst your constituency. Now, the data is unambiguous. Slide, that is the end of it. When institutions broker trust well, when they listen across differences, when they facilitate rather than fight, when they hold the space rather than hold the argument, trust definitely rises, right? So again, this is not a communication strategy. This is a form of leadership that everyone should embrace, and that is the standard that the report is now asking corporate relations, media, NGOs, as well as the government to meet. Thank you so much.
Salam sejahtera and a very good morning to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer gives us a reason to be proud. Malaysia today ranks 8th highest globally, with trust index score of 71. We stand shoulder and shoulder with nations like the UAE, China, India and Indonesia, and well above developed markets such as the United States, United Kingdom, Trust in business here is also especially strong at 76%, among the highest in the world. This is a remarkable foundation for all of us in the business. It shows that Malaysians believe in the capacity of our companies, our employers, and our entrepreneurs to deliver value. But beneath the good news lies a warning. This is about insularity. It is rising 65%. Malaysians who hesitate to trust those who differ in values and beliefs. We are building walls of fences around our own people. 47% say that distrust has reached crisis levels, where differences are not just tolerated less, but actively weaponized. This is indeed sad. We often hear this. This is the most wonderful country in the world, but there are people around us who do things that make the country look bad. Despite having gained independence for 69 years and becoming Malaysians for 63 years, we are still grappling with trust issues. And many on this side of the country still don't know that Malaysians do celebrate the rice festivals of Ahmad Khan and Gawai at the end of this month in Sabah and Sarawak. This is because their narrow festivals is confined to just Hari Raya Puasa, Hari Raya Haji, which is next week, Deepavali, Christmas and Chinese New Year. This unfamiliarity or unawareness certainly calls for a reset in our values if we want Malaysia to prosper even more. We have also other challenges, from unstable foreign leaders to our own local politicians who every now and then stoke the fires of race and religion to gain an extra edge in their political careers. People say that the 21st century is the Asian century. Have we done enough to capitalize on such opportunities? 26 years has since lapsed since the turn of the new century. Have we propelled Malaysia to be again an economic powerhouse we once were before the Asian financial crisis or the COVID pandemic? Let us not be distracted by petty fragmentation or mistrust that can only destroy our country. If we allow fragmentation to persist in our society, be it at governmental, educational, corporate or social levels, it is definitely very dangerous. It is dangerous because it erodes the bridges that we hold our society together. Ladies and gentlemen, since February 28, there has been a lot of economic unease in the country. But thanks to the Madani government, it is holding well in terms of its fuel strategy to calm our nerves. But recession fears are at an all-time high. Only 39% believe the next generation will be better off. Here lies an opportunity. I know that when institutions can bridge the trust divides well, low-income Malaysians can experience an 18-point boost in terms of trust. And that is proof that inclusive leadership can close gaps and strengthen resilience. This is because Malaysians generally trust their institutions, but they expect more. And employers are seen as the most obligated to bridge such divides. And those of you who are employers here can do much to meet those expectations. Another startling fact, 73% of Malaysians worry that foreign interests are deliberately contaminating our media environment with falsehoods. Maybe this has got to do with advances in the super high mobility of our current smartphones. And with all sorts of bizarre reports from dubious backgrounds and from people with strange agendas. When this happens, you get exposed to all kinds of nonsense. As a journalist, I know that our local media must do better. As such, the newly formed Malaysian Media Council and my organization, the Malaysian Press Institute, are increasing our training programs. We are also engaging with the authorities to build trust between the government and the people it governs, via more vibrant and trustworthy media organizations. The modest 30 million ringgit grant from the government that is being rolled out from this month to local news organizations, big and small, will certainly be a welcome boost to improving journalism standards in the country. As such, big mainstream news organizations as well as small but responsible news portals will be better equipped with improved equipment and specialized training programs to not only report the facts well, but also find ways to promote greater understanding and build more trust. I believe all of us here have a responsibility to be resolute and inspire the shared interests that unite Malaysians across all sectors and colors. The opportunity before us is to deploy our trust capital more broadly, to bridge differences, to encourage shared interests, to build cohesion that underpins growth, investment, and resilience. All these are very important ingredients to fight fragmentation in our society. Trust is not just about believing in institutions, it is about believing in one another. If we can expand the circle of trust beyond those who look, think, and vote like us, Malaysia will not only remain the top tier globally, we will also become a beacon of unity in a fractured world. So, let us treat trust as our most precious commodity we hold. Let us invest in it, protect it, and extend it. Because when trust grows, Malaysia grows.
How we can broker and hold trust for Malaysia. How we can broker and hold trust for Malaysia. All these external factors going on.
I think one word.
Jangan mention.
Two words. Two, it's I think number one, transparency. Be transparent. Two, authenticity. If you speak, based on our research with on Gen Zs and a bit of Gen Y and Gen Zs, we haven't touched on the Gen Alpha yet. So I think authenticity is important. They want something real, just be real. And it's also an expensive world. So not everything can, I think partnership, collaboration is important at this point in time. As much as you can bring everybody in your effort, initiative, and it's always about people first. It's not you. It's not just your brand. It has to be driven by purpose.